Hello. Wow, this room is so empty. Wow. Let's see here. Oop, no. It's too bright over here. Or too dark over here. Brighten it up. There we go. Of course, now it's a little orange. Ew, good enough. Okay, how's it going? Hey there, ZJ13 Code 69. You just want me to say that all the time, don't you? Oh yeah, I'm using the other microphone today. We don't need that. It does seem bare in here though. Hello, Immense Plumber X. Thanks for being here. So, Mr. Bress, please give me money. Yes. I get that comment at least a dozen times a day on my videos. At least. Probably more than that, actually. All right. So we've got a video this week. Oh, yeah. As you can see behind me, I'm still kind of in limbo right now. I'm waiting on the new studio to be built. I am going to be sharing progress pics this week, but the walls and roof and floor are all built, and yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm going to be getting solar panels on the roof so I can just live off the grid in my man cave. So also, I've been excited to start researching for an upcoming video about the JFK assassination. I actually went to the library a couple days ago, picked up some books that I haven't read yet. Most of my books that I own are conspiracy, kind of lean towards it being a conspiracy. But here's the new ones I got. I got the Kennedy Assassinations by Mel Ton. This is probably one of the most well-known books that is very anti-conspiracy one. It's Case Closed by Gerald Posner. Came out, I think, in the 90s originally. And then one I hadn't heard of, but the library had, and it looked intriguing. Not in Your Lifetime, the defining book on the JFK assassination, 50 Years On, Weighing the Evidence by Anthony Summers. Looks like it's going to be a good one. So I'm trying to be thorough with my research on this. Oh. No worries. Hey, just listen at school. Get your teacher to play it on the big screen. It's all good. Oh, you changed your username. Okay, well, I like this one better, and I like the suit. I actually have a banana suit, just like that. Yeah, it's gonna be a fun one. All right, let's get into the facts don't care about your feelings, dude. Ben Shapiro, who really, I wasn't going to react to this, but I just saw it popped up on my recommended. I get recommended his stuff sometimes. Also, I saw some pundits react to it. But fascism right wing? So actually, I think Ben Shapiro has made a video about fascism before. I hadn't seen that one, but this is his new one that just dropped. It says 8 days ago. This thing already has what, 215,000 views. Not seeing this video yet, I can say that I'm probably going to predict it. He's probably going to be like, oh, people on the left say that fascism is, or they call people fascists too much. They just call anyone who disagrees with them a fascist. And to some extent, that is true. It's an overused term. I made a whole video about what fascism is. I'm not the most proud of that video. I think it needs work still. I kind of go in cycles with what the definition of fascism is, but just trying to simplify it to beginners, it's not easy to simplify, first of all. But if you have to simplify it, especially when I used to teach it to high schoolers, it really is just conform or else. So the idea that everybody has to conform for the good of society. If you don't, there are strict punishments. And that's why fascism always goes hand in hand with authoritarianism and totalitarianism, because that seems to be there has to be that or else part. If you just say conform for the greater good, that's just collectivism, which most countries are for, especially most Asian countries value collectivism over individualism. In the United States, we're a more individualist society, and so anytime there's collective action that's requested, it gets a lot of backlash. We have a long tradition in the United States of just freaking out about anytime the federal government in particular decides we're going to try collectivism out for a specific issue, or usually public good, like a new public good we want to redistribute tax dollars for to attempt to help society. Anyway, fascism was all about, some people today are actually pro-fascism still, because they truly believe that we have to have forced conformity if we want progress to be made. I personally am strongly against fascism and all forms of authoritarianism. I think they're the worst thing for society. So when they say Nazis were lefty wing, when the Nazis were literally on the right wing of the German Congress. Yeah, but they used the word socialism. And so the fact that they kept using that word socialism is why so many revisionists have said, hey, see, they were actually left wing. When I say revisionist, that's not always a pejorative, by the way. But yeah. Oh, Mrs. B is here, even though I think she's driving right now. So maybe she's listening. If she's listening, then my daughter is too. Hey, Mrs. B. Hey, I don't want to say my daughter's name for privacy, but hey, daughter. That sounds. Don't call me daughter. Okay. I'm sorry. We have to. Please, I hope your eardrums don't rip out. Let's go ahead and start this video. It's not too long, at least. I'll pause it.
Who wants to end a fascist who wants to end this democracy?
Everybody knows what fascism means, right? After all, our politicians and media members, they use the word constantly. Everybody you don't like is a fascist. Everybody you do like is fighting fascism. But what exactly is fascism?
He has a good point. I do have to agree with Ben Shapiro that it is a term way overused to attack political opponents. It's annoying. Yeah, so on that point, I agree with you, Mr. Shapiro.
The one thing everybody seems to know is that fascism is like Hitler. And this means the chief characteristic of fascism is the Holocaust. Therefore, by the transitive property, everyone you don't like is fascist. Every fascist is Hitler. The most Hitler thing is the Holocaust. So,
the most Hitler thing is the Holocaust. That's an interesting way to. Oh, look at that, Twitler, with Trump's face on it, a mix between Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump. Interesting. I haven't seen that before. No, I would say that's also a reductive way of looking at it. He's oversimplifying. The Holocaust, in my view, is not really. I don't even associate fascism with that necessarily. I associate just authoritarianism and genocide. That's what they are. That's what it is. It's a genocide. And when we talk about fascism, we're mostly talking about philosophy, and we're talking political science. So I don't know. I guess it's God wins law. Everything comes back to Hitler, right?
Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or whomever the media say that day is probably going to commit a Holocaust. Invariably, the people in the media who use the word fascism use it to refer to a politician of the right. But it turns out that fascism is right-wing only when compared with outright communism. Fascism in Europe was a reactionary force.
Okay, what he just said, let's play that again.
With outright communism.
Wait.
Of the right. But it turns out that fascism is right-wing only when compared with outright communism.
That statement doesn't really it's such a stupid thing to say. I don't know. Only when compared to communism. I mean, we're starting to conflate things that should not be conflated already, so not a good start there.
Fascism in Europe was a reactionary force. By American standards, fascism, which calls for unity of central authority and
Aha! Unity of central authority, yes. And so, yeah, that's conformity. But central authority has to be unified as well, obviously. But society as a whole has to be unified. Remember the whole fascist symbol of the bundle of sticks? But man, he just like gish gallops so much. You got to really take your time with this here.
force. By American standards, fascism, which was outright communism. Fascism in Europe was a reactionary force.
Okay, so it is typically reactionary. Fascism almost always is reactionary, but we shouldn't use absolutes. So you got that part right.
By American standards, fascism, which calls for unity of central authority.
Unity of central authority. I mean, that's there's a lot of things that fit that description, but I mean, I would say unity of all of society, central authority being united is kind of goes hand in hand with that.
Governmental control over private industry, among other agenda items.
Governmental control over private industry is more of a effect. It's an effect of fascism. It's often what happens with fascism because, if you're trying to get everybody on the same page, oftentimes that's what the central government has to just completely take over all major aspects of society, including factors of production to a certain extent, although they often fascism, first of all, is pretty rare. We really only saw it with in terms of like being actually implemented in terms of taking a philosophy idea into full practice with Mussolini in Italy in the 1920s and 1930s. And then I would say to a certain extent, yes, Germany under Hitler, the Third Reich. But even then, you could say, well, it wasn't there. There were differences between the two. But yeah, those probably are the best definitions. You also have Franco in Spain that was heavily inspired by fascism. And there was definitely similarities between Italy and Spain in the 1930s. But, more modern dictatorships, it was less fascist and more just kind of just authoritarianism with fascism sprinkled in when it came to certain things. Like, I don't know, it's not, if you just call it fascist, like if you just call the Soviet Union fascist, I think that's an oversimplification, for example. So, but even like Italy, the best example we have of a fascist state, I think even that's problematic just to like simplify it that much.
Was far more left-wing than right-wing, which is why so many members of the American left were originally quite warm. So many members of the
hold on a second
for unity of central authority and governmental control over private industry, among other agenda items, was far more left-wing than right-wing, which is why so many members of the American left were originally quite warm toward Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. To understand this,
well, some were, but many on the right were as well. This is not something that was exclusive to left-wing or right-wing. You did have a lot of American socialists who were like, oh, we like what you're doing in the Soviet Union, and even some that were praising what was going on in Italy and even Germany. Remember, Adolf Hitler was the Time Person of the Year. I don't remember what year it was. It was in the 1930s before he invaded Poland. But yeah, so he has a point there as well. Man, he talks so fast. Yeah, but I think, again, it's just a classic example of he's just mixing up a bunch of terms that, making it even more confusing.
let's look briefly at the history of fascism.
Facts. Oh, Facts. Okay. Is this a new thing he's doing? Starting to focus on facts?
Fascism is a very messy concept in that it crosses
Yes.
streams with a wide variety of other ideologies, ranging from Marxism to religious integralism. So what are the common features of fascism?
Religious integralism. What is that? I never even heard of that. I bet you he hasn't either. He just kind of, someone else wrote it for him. Integralism, an interpretation of Catholic social teaching that argues the principle that the Catholic faith should be the basis of public law and public policy within civil society. So it's specific to Catholicism. Well, yeah, this was the predominant view of medieval Europe in terms of the Roman Catholic Church and governments having a partnership. That's interesting that he brought that up. Okay. But he says Marxism is inherently fascist. That is not right. That is not true.
First, fascism is characterized by a belief in the moral imperative of the centralized state. We can sense the roots of.
I mean, it starts with It starts with a unified society. That's where it starts. A centralized state often springs up out of necessity to make sure that that happens.
To fascism going all the way back to Plato, who called for a philosopher king in a utopian state, although there are those who read Plato as satiric in this call. We can sense fascist themes in Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 1712 to 1778, who called for the dictatorship of the general will, a sort of miasmatic power emanating from the people but vested in a centralized authority.
Yeah, he's trying to use big words here. Miasmatic. 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 The style of singing several notes to one syllable. Oh, okay. Yeah. I had to look that one up. I didn't know what that word means. So it's usually associated with singing. Did he write this script? I don't think he did. But yeah, the idea that everybody needs to be unified, thinking of like a choir all on the same, in the same, singing the same pitch, or harmonizing, all on the same beat in order for it to sound like it's supposed to. Okay.
In which all people would feel themselves members. This is why Robespierre, the author of The Reign of Terror, cited Rousseau as divine. George Frederick Hegel, 1770 through 1831, saw the power of the state as the apotheosis of mankind. Quote,
I mean, yeah. Yeah. But how should the state be given power? That matters, right? It doesn't matter what your views of the state are unless you also talk about who or how that power is distributed and how that power is obtained, which a lot of these folks he's probably mentioning would also be for democracy. And so, yeah, he's just cherry picking here.
State consists in the march of God in the world. This means that fascism sees both economic and individual freedoms as antithetical to the good when they challenge the power of the state. Second, fascism is characterized by a belief in, quote, the state consists in the march of God in the world. This means that fascism sees both economic and individual freedoms as antithetical to the good when they challenge the power of the state. Second, fascism.
I don't even think they used the word fascism at all, though, back then. So he's just making stuff up at this point.
Is characterized by a belief in nationalism, or in its most virulent form, racial hierarchy.
That's another thing that can be separate from fascism. They do often go hand in hand, because if you want a unified society that has to be unified, it absolutely has to be unified. Nationalism is something that makes that a lot easier. Authoritarianism and nationalism both make that so much easier. So that's why authoritarianism and nationalism are like almost always there for fascism to work. But yeah, so I would say also, I wonder what his definition of nationalism is, basically, because people conflate nationalism with patriotism, but it's not. It's nationalism is the belief that your country is not only awesome, but it's the most awesome. It's better than all other countries. So it takes it a step further.
We can see the roots of fascism in ancient Sparta, a militaristic dictatorship rooted in racial purity. With the death of biblical adherence to the notion of a universal humanity during the Enlightenment, racial division became a deep part of Western thought. Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804, spoke about a hierarchy of races in his earlier work. He attempted to walk some of that back later in life. This sort of thought was exacerbated by Charles Darwin's theory.
I mean, that was the common thought of the time, from the 1500s up to the 1800s. Most so-called intellectuals identified racial hierarchies and even class and political hierarchies as being a natural, quote unquote, natural thing. So that wasn't extraordinary for, I mean, how is that related to fascism? It's just the same. I mean, you're just basically like attributing random things to fascism at this point. Yeah, you didn't know you were a fascist? Okay. I do not know if he's a creationist or not. But, you know, creationists are fascists. That's a joke. Ultranationalism, I think, is more of, again, an effect of fascism. They go hand in hand, you know. All right, back to the fast talker, Gish Caliper.
Which was misread to embrace scientific
Now
racism.
it's talking about Darwin. Oh,
he attempted to walk some of that back later in life. This sort of thought was exacerbated by Charles Darwin's theory, which was misread to embrace scientific racism. Such scientific racism became a dominant philosophy throughout much of the progressive world.
Yeah, we can all unite against scientific racism. I'm assuming Shapiro is strongly against it. Almost everyone is strongly against scientific racism today, except for, like, you know, the white nationalist types or like them. But yeah, like eugenics is probably the best example we have of scientific racism, which was actually pretty mainstream, sadly, in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And the Supreme Court even upheld eugenics legally, and it's still on the books technically. So that's a crazy thing about that. The case Buck v. Bell, which I made a video about.
Which is why both Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson were advocates of eugenics. Third, fascism.
Oh, well, Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. So are you saying the Republicans were a eugenics party? Huh, interesting. Interesting. I thought the Republican Party was always good.
Fascism is militaristic. It sees organization around military lines as a model for human existence.
Yeah, so again, it's militarism is an effect, again, of fascism. He's listing three effects. Authoritarianism is needed, but in order to make it easier for the authority to control the population, it often needs nationalism and militarism. So militarism just being everything in society revolves around the military. It's being in the military is the highest. It's like towards the top of the hierarchy, and everyone's encouraged to join the military, support the military, and lots of resources are devoted to the military.
And recommends action in the world as a response to existential nihilism. There's a reason Friedrich Nietzsche, 1844 to 1900, was beloved of fascists. He spoke of the Übermensch, who would be able to conquer through power of sheer will. Fascism suggests a sort of mystical spirit residing in the nation that must be fed through expansionism and militarization of life. Historically, the most important fascist was actually not Hitler, but Benito Mussolini. Mussolini was the first politician to truly channel the roiling forces of fascism into one movement. The word
yeah, that's what I said in my video as well. It's still kind of an oversimplification, but in terms of like a major political movement and actually getting into office, which, you know, he just took over, he just forced his way in there as a dictator. But yeah, that's probably the best example we have, and the first good example we have.
Fascism comes from the word fascis, a bundle of rods grouped together to form a Roman weapon.
Yep.
Fascism comes from Italy. Mussolini was originally attracted to the work of Marx, which was not anti-fascist in any real way. Many of the predicates of fascism also work quite well.
I mean, it was agnostic to fascism. It wasn't about fascism. Did he even mention it? Did Marx even mention it? Did Engels even mention fascism? I don't think they did. It was just they're talking about workers most of the time, and those who owned everything. The owners and the workers is what they spent most of their time talking about. It was more economic than anything. Political was a byproduct. So they were, if you look at what they were talking about as solutions to the economic problems, they were talking about possible political solutions, but also they were just predicting what they thought was going to happen based on trends, based on history, based on the momentum of history. And I think they were wrong so far. We've seen they were wrong. However, history has yet to be written. So hundreds of years in the future, they may be proven right. We don't know. But it was not a good, the 20th century was not good for Marxism. We could say that, I think, pretty confidently that those who associated with their ideas often did bad things and abused power and yada yada. But anyway, I'm going to play that again because he's just like, I think his goal here in this video is just, just fascism as communism is what he's really, I think that's the core idea he's trying to, I mean, this is disinformation. This really is disinformation. He's trying to, him and his team are making it so that you always think, his viewers always associate communism with fascism.
Mussolini was originally attracted to the work of Marx, which was not anti-fascist in any real way. Many of the predicates of fascism also worked quite well for Lenin and Stalin, but Mussolini eventually came to realize rejecting Marx could serve his own ends. In the aftermath of World War I, Mussolini gained power by marching on Rome with the acquiescence of the king in order to supposedly save the state from Bolshevism. Mussolini's philosophy was somewhat vague, but it carried all the central tenets.
That's what's so crazy is that, I mean, how can you deny that? Like the fact that there was this struggle between Bolshevists in Italy in right after World War I and fascists. And the fascists ended up winning and took control. And then they proceeded to terrorize anyone associated with communism after that. And this is all happening while there's a Red Scare going on throughout Europe and North America. So like, it's interesting to see him try to like, he's trying so hard to like say, hey, communists and fascists, they're basically on the same team. So but he does mention that, like it was, I'm glad at least he mentions that Mussolini was, he gained power talking trash about communists, so it's, he still says that he's, which I would think is probably hurting what he's trying to do with this. John Locke, who wasn't anti-fascist in any real way. Yeah, you could say the same thing. A lot of these, that's Rousseau, who wasn't anti-fascist in any real way. Didn't he mention Rousseau in there and like try to basically all these beloved philosophers who, Kant, he was talking about talking trash on Kant. Yeah, fascists famously love communism. Yeah, a lot of people would call it like, it's funny, he played FDR, he played a little montage and FDR was in there when he was describing, he also showed Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt talking about how fascism actually is something more aligned with them. When really, I think, FDR was a big reason why fascism was never really took over in the United States. But I think the Constitution helped a lot too. I mean, let's be honest, the systems, the structures we had in place already have been pretty darn good at fighting fascism. Yeah, overload a bunch of, I mean, he's throwing a bunch of big words. Oh, he sounds smart. I guess he's got to be right. Mixing up all kinds of stuff together that shouldn't be mixed up. Oh, Mr. Terry's here. Hey there. Yeah, I know. There's certain words that do just need to go away, I think. Fascism, really socialism, um, ideology, even that word is so misused these days. Oh yeah, Smedley Butler. I such a American hero. I love that dude. I would make a video about him, but knowing better, I already did a great video about Smedley Butler.
On Rome with the acquiescence of the king in order to supposedly save the state from Bolshevism. Mussolini's philosophy was somewhat vague, but it carried all the central tenets of fascism.
Yeah, that's usually how con artists are. That's usually how demagogues are. They're vague. That's how they gain power. They don't want to be too specific. If they're too specific, they're going to start disillusioning people or making some people feel like they're not included. So,
1927, Mussolini laid out the, quote, doctrine of fascism. He wrote, anti-individualistic, the fascist conception of life stresses the importance of the state and accepts the individual only insofar as his interests coincide with those of the state. Mussolini wrote that fascism was a, quote, spiritual attitude. That spiritual attitude required outward expansion, quote, the state is not only authority which governs and confers legal form and spiritual value on individual wills, it is also power which makes its will felt and respected beyond its own frontiers, thus affording practical proof of the universal character of the decisions necessary to ensure its development.
I mean, again, he's being pretty broad here as well. Shapiro did not mention he didn't mention Giovanni Gentili. Giovanni Gentili. He's the father of fascism, essentially. That's how Mussolini was inspired by Gentile. Like the book, the Doctrine of Fascism. I think they wrote that together. So yeah, that's really, in terms of, I think really what it was is like a mix of, I think Mussolini really did believe in this stuff, but also like, he wanted to like justify his over his just taking of power, becoming a dictator to make all this crap happen. Same thing could be said about Stalin, obviously. But yeah, he didn't mention Giovanni Gentile. I love saying his name, sorry.
This implies organization and expansion potential, if not actual. That expansion meant not just militarization, but gargantuan public works, massive expansion of the welfare state, corporatization of the private sector, with the government leaving private industry intact, but essentially working hand in glove with it to control it and channel its resources in the direction sought by the fascists.
I mean, every country has done this ever since, and even before then. I mean, are you saying that the Whig Party was fascist? The Whig Party was the first major political party in the United States to actively call for major government investing and in partnerships with private industry for big infrastructure projects, in particular canals and roads. So were they fascist? I mean, he's trying to like make this all fit together in one neat package. Like, oh wow, if the government's going to, be fascist, then that means it's going to take over not only not going to get rid of civil liberties and civil rights, but it's also going to just take over all private industry. So, that's kind of what he's doing here.
Private companies remaining in private hands. That's the reason that we're able to create innovative products that are recognized and used the world over right here in America. We know how.
I mean, it's one of the reasons. We have a good patent system in the United States. One of the reasons why the United States became so wealthy was because of intellectual property rights being so darn good here. Also, contracts being so strong, because we know that the courts have your back with contracts so well, where in other countries it wasn't necessarily the case. So a lot of innovation here because of that. Also, a lot of immigrants from all around the world coming here. That helped a lot because you had like such a diverse range of perspectives coming together to innovate. Sometimes, though, the innovation has come from people working officially in government, A lot of innovations in particular came out of the space race with NASA. So, and they continue to as well. So, and the military especially. So if you just say, oh, like what he just said, let me play it again here.
Corporatization of the private sector, with the government leaving private industry intact, but essentially working hand in glove with it to control it and channel its resources in the direction sought by the fascists.
I mean, that sounds like most countries today, right? I'm actually making a video right now on corporate welfare. That's what we have. I mean,
private companies remaining in private hands. That's the reason that we're able to create innovative products that are recognized and used the world over right here in America.
Yeah. What he just said is that's not factual.
You know how incompetent the government is? Imagine them actually controlling all private business. Things would look pretty bleak.
Oh yeah, no one's calling for the government to control all private business. That's attacking a straw man, which Shapiro does all the time. You don't. Who and what sane person would call for the government to control everything? I mean, we have Kim Jong-un maybe saying that in North Korea, but that's a command economy. And command economies just don't exist outside of North Korea for good reason. They're horrible.
Here at the Daily Wire, we choose to partner with great companies that are free to be innovative and provide our audience with awesome products. A company like Genucell. I've known Genucell since
that was it. Okay, we'll jump ahead here. Oh, skincare. I could probably use this. Yeah, I have really bad skin issues. Okay. Oh, genucell.com/facts. Of course, facts.
Genucell.com/facts right now.
Still going.
All orders are going to include a /facts.
Oh wow.
About Europe.
Okay, here we go.
Regime. Mussolini quickly gained worldwide credit, and the great leader. Facts to get started. Genucell.com/facts. Glorification of the state and the great leader lay at the root of the Mussolini regime. Mussolini quickly gained worldwide credence and approval. Fascism spread throughout.
It wasn't just glorification of the state. It was also glorification of the nation. First and foremost, the nation. That's what nationalism is all about. Because I think that's more palpable. That's something that's more effective if you want to control population. But yeah, also North Korea. Yeah, you could say they worship the state there. They're brainwashed. It's one giant cult in North Korea.
Throughout Europe. Hitler greatly admired Mussolini, of course, and Hitler's original beer hall putsch was supposed to mimic the success of Mussolini's March on Rome. Hitlerian fascism was significantly more totalitarian than Mussolini's brand.
Yes.
The cult of the great leader reached its fruition in the Führer. Philosopher Martin Heidegger embodied the feelings of millions in 1933, quote, "The Führer himself and he alone is the German reality, present and future, and its law, Heil Hitler." Nazism, of course, took on racial eugenics in a far more significant way, culminating in the Holocaust. And Nazism's militarism ended in the catastrophe of World War II. Hitler was not the only fascist to follow Mussolini's lead. Fascist regimes took over in a variety of countries, ranging from Hungary and Romania to Paraguay and eventually Iraq.
To a certain extent, you could say they were fascists as well. Iraq, that's interesting. He would call it fascist. But I mean, really just authoritarian is more accurate to say.
Other states, ranging from Spain to Argentina, mimic many aspects of fascism, leading many to label them quasi-fascists. Certain aspects of fascism...
quasi-fascist might be more accurate for all these countries that came post-World War II, to be honest.
Particularly in the economic realm, could even be seen under FDR in the United States.
There he goes. In the economic realm. Now, what you're just describing is basically social democracy, where the government decides to take control of certain public goods. I mean, just calling that fascist, I think, is intellectually dishonest.
FDR's New Deal, complete with government resources directed at forcing economic conformity, controlled huge swaths of American life.
Every country in the entire world does this to some extent. This is not something that's, oh my gosh, like we at the local level all the way up to a federal level in every country. This is what happens. So redistributing public resources, the government taking over certain private industries has happened. I mean, the post office, for crying out loud, the very beginning of the United States history, the postal service was there. That's something that could be done by the private sector, and yet government took it over. It's built into the foundations, like the creation of the country.
With FDR aide Harry Hopkins openly suggesting, quote, "We are not afraid of exploring anything within the law, and we have a lawyer who will declare anything you want to do to be legal." And this is why the term fascism is so attractive in political discourse.
What a cherry-picked quote that was.
Everybody thinks of brown shirts and small mustaches when they invoke fascism, But there are a lot of aspects of fascism that survive in a variety of forms. Corporatism, government working hand in glove with industry, is a form of economic fascism. Racial hierarchies can be indicative of fascist thinking, particularly when combined with differential treatment under law. Militarism can be termed fascist, particularly when...
Did Shapiro just acknowledge systemic racism existing? Good for him. But yeah, like, he's trying to make it like economic fascism is anytime governments are more involved with the economy. That's quite a stretch of the term fascism. But I mean, if you want to get technical, like, well, conform or else, I guess he has a point. I mean, I wouldn't use that word fascism, but I mean, if you're going to be consistent though with it, you're going to have to use it all the time because it's a very common thing for governments to step in for greater good purposes. I mean, he's trying to make it out to be this fringe thing that literally conservative politicians are okay with. He's a conservative. He supports conservative politicians. So, are you going to start calling them fascists for that? Like, for example, if you look at the first stimulus for the COVID-19 pandemic, that was bipartisan. That was the vast majority of Republicans in both houses of Congress supported stimulus checks, not just to families, but also businesses, private businesses, supposedly small businesses, but many of them actually, as we later turned out, were quite big. Are they fascists? Would he call them fascists? I don't think he would.
Racial hierarchies can be indicative of fascist thinking, particularly when combined with differential treatment under law.
I can't believe you said that.
Militarism can be termed fascist, particularly when its resources are directed at domestic populations.
Yeah.
Few people will admit to being fascist today.
Yep.
It'd be far more useful for everybody to simply critique policies with reference to history, but without reference to the buzzword that poisons everyday discourse.
I agree with you, Ben. Thank you. That's a great line what you just said.
We can have good and interesting conversations about the value of corporatism, for example, without invoking Hitler. We can talk about opposing the shortcomings of atomistic individualism without invoking the Holocaust. The truth is that nowadays, the term fascism tends to be a slur rather than a predicate to a useful conversation.
Yeah.
As it turns out, everybody you don't like probably isn't Hitler.
All right. I like that ending. That was actually a solid ending. So good way to, he was trying to find common ground there at the end. So I appreciate that. But, you know, lots of problems for the rest of the video. Just remember what the definition of fascism is. I still go back to it's conform or else. It's the belief that society all has to be on the same page. If you're not, then there's harsh consequences for that. That's the oversimplified explanation of fascism. There are lots of videos that do a better job explaining it. I mean, I made one. I tried to. I'm not the most proud of that video. The video that I recommend more that you should check out is by Ryan Chapman. He released it a couple years ago. He did a pretty solid job with his fascism video. I reacted to Ryan Chapman about what was the video I reacted to? Oh, about how media or journalists used to be less biased, or they used to be more objective reporting. So I don't know if that's still up on here on Twitch, but maybe it is. Yes, you've seen it. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a little dry. That's my biggest criticism of Ryan, is that, you know, you need to make this stuff more accessible to the masses. But I didn't know you were repeating this. I don't remember this at all, but I'll write it down now. Yeah. Wololo juice. Thank you for the. I couldn't find a good video. I was like looking at some, like what you guys suggested last week, tasting history. I was like, I don't know. I wasn't really feeling it, but I keep the suggestions coming for sure. I didn't write that one down, so I'll get it down here. Anything else I should react to? I do this every Monday at 9 a.m. Central. Oh, that's what it is. Okay. That's what you were talking about, not Ryan Chapman. Okay. Yeah, she was an atheist, wasn't she? Yeah, that is interesting. All right. Seconded by Lucasaw6. That was a funny comment there. All right. If you do have suggestions for me, Twitter is probably a good place to do that. Or just email me at iamMrBeat@gmail.com. It has to be preferably American history, economics, or geography. Those are my three things that I'm more informed about. Because if it's just Hungarian history, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be very useful. Adding my commentary is kind of pointless. So this was low-hanging fruit this week when I saw Ben Shapiro posted another fascism video. I was like, I can't resist. All right. But yeah, I do this every Monday, 9 a.m. Central. Thanks for being here. We'll be back next week. Hopefully soon I'll be in the new studio. I'm excited to show you. This is also kind of a good way to get a behind the scenes look as I move into my new studio, which is going to be in my backyard. So very excited to work in my backyard, in my man cave, not drive Mrs. Beat crazy anymore with me editing videos. All right. Have a good week, everyone. Take care.